Hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 2 of Violet Evergarden. And man, this show is a lot more somber than I originally thought it was going to be. I mean, up until episode 1 last week, I had only seen thumbnails on Netflix about the show, and so I didn't quite know exactly what I was getting into. But this show, what I like about it is it's very quiet and somber and elegant. Like, even it's KyoAni, so the animation's gorgeous throughout, but even the war scenes, even when there's blood and gore, it's beautiful. So it's just like got this somber tone around it that you just kind of quietly get sucked in. Like, I found myself last episode wanting to be quiet during the reaction because I just wanted to like soak it all in, and so it was hard to like be like, oh yeah, I'm reacting to something, I just want to sit there and watch it. And so yeah, it's just, man, it's really good so far. And I almost cried during the last episode, and that was episode 1. And I'm not an emotional reactor. I'm really not. Like, stuff that people are like, oh, I sobbed during that episode. It takes a lot for me to get emotional in a series. And I find myself getting more emotional in manga than I do anime, I guess because it's more intimate. And this show is very intimate. And so I'm wondering, I'm like, oh, it's going to make me a mess. And I'm not sure I'm prepared for that. I'm not usually like that with shows. But what I like about this show as well is that it's dealing in very interesting concepts. So concepts about post-war and veterans and finding your place and your identity back in society when you don't quite fit the mold to begin with. And Violet's like a pretty textbook example of not fitting the mold. So I had some people on Patreon, and by now y'all have probably commented on episode 1 talking about how she is human. So I'm interested to know more about that and how that whole works with her being, like, she seems so robotic and so detached. And if she is human, I'm wondering what her backstory is, and I'm assuming we're going to find that out. All the person on Patreon would say is that she was an orphan, and I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. But I also got some voice actor information, which makes me really hyped for the show. So Violet is played by the same VA as Mikasa from Attack on Titan, which I'm like, cool, that makes total sense, because Mikasa is very quiet and reserved, kind of like Violet. KyoAni plays Hodgin, and he's the voice actor for Adam from Skate. And as soon as I found that out, I was like, ooh! And honestly, going back and rewatching episode 1, you can hear it. You can definitely hear Adam's voice in Hodgin. He just doesn't sound maniacal or as flamboyant. So that's fun. And then, of course, you have the voice actor for Tsukishima from Haikyuu and Akuya from Free. He's voicing Benedict. I didn't really realize that at all, but now it's like, oh, okay. But y'all, one of my favorite voice actors, Daisuke, who plays Okawa from Haikyuu, is voicing Major Gilbert. And going back and re-listening, yeah, it's him. And I'm so excited because I have a feeling we're going to get flashbacks. This seems like the type of love story and romance where we're going backwards. We have the final moments of them together, which was heartbreaking, and I have a feeling this series is going to be backtracking and going through their relationship to give us, the audience, some more context. But man, you didn't need any context to feel the emotion between those two at the end of episode 1. Just, whew. So that has me pretty excited to see where we go to from here with this series. But y'all, I am super excited. Let us dive in, shall we? We are going to watch episode 2 of Violet Evergarden. And we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. No! Oh, this show, it gets you right there at the end. You know, you're having a really interesting time watching this show, and it's really like intriguing. It just, like I said before this episode started, it just sucks you in. And so I'm sorry if I was quiet through most of this reaction, but it's just like this show, you just get sucked in and you just want to sit there and watch it. And then by the end of it, it starts putting all these emotions and feels. So I'm like, they don't say he's dead. Hodgins does not say that Gilbert's dead. It just said he's not coming back anymore. So I don't know what that means. I actually want to go back through this episode because there were several moments that I was it's so easy to get lost in the artwork and the animation and gorgeousness of this episode that I was like, wait, what's happening? And so I wanted to go back through it, but I love the concept of her trying to adjust and the concept of the auto memory doll being that's what the typewriter was called. And it's like, oh, okay, I love you in the typewriter. It's like, yeah, okay. But I love the idea of Violet being the idea of contradictions. That Violet herself, much like her working in the auto memory doll, much like Erica's situation, Violet is a contradiction. She is a weapon, and she's been raised to be a weapon and molded to be this thing that causes destruction. But she's this beautiful young woman who seems very quiet and soft and compassionate, but she's also cold and indiscriminate and doesn't seem to have any, independence of her own. She just kind of follows whatever people tell her to do. And so she is a walking contradiction. And I love that theme in this episode of it just all being contradictory. But we get at the start of this episode, I'm so fascinated by all the Gilbert moments. Like every time Gilbert is on screen, and it's not just the voice actor, which now I heard all the voice actors in this. And I could hear their voices. I could hear Adam, I could hear Tsukishima, Ikuya, all of those in here, and Mikasa. But, and Oikawa, you can hear him in this too. But Gilbert is such an interesting character already, and we know nothing about him, just his expressions and the way his emotions are put on. But this whole family dynamic, so 4 years ago, Gilbert had known Violet for 4 years. I'm presuming this is Port of Stimmer, Liedenschlafflich. So I'm assuming this is before the war broke out, or during the war, I'm assuming, is when all this is going down. Captain Dithard Bougainvillea. Dithard, it's like Die Hard, it's like, or Diet Hard. Dithard. The names in this show are ridiculous. I'm glad that Violet is pretty tame and Hodgins, but Dithard Bougainvillea. Oh my gosh, what a mouthful. Diet Hard. That's all I'll call him, is Diet Hard. Your brother is here to see you. So the brother is Dithard. Okay. And Gilbert is the brother, Gil. And the brother, Dithard, already giving me like Dragon Moon vibes from Banana Fish. I think it's just the braid and the hair. But he has the same green eyes as Gilbert, but they're brighter. Like Gilbert's are like a dark emerald green, and his eyes are like a bright, vibrant green, and he has the beauty mark and everything. But they look very, very similar. Like I thought it was Gilbert at first, but it's like, no. So you look depressed as usual. So this little scene, we get such a lot of stuff at once, and it was really hard to process it. So you look depressed, and he says, you look just like father, which they both look very similar. So I'm like, but that would mean you kind of look like father too. He says, you haven't changed either. He says, father would not approve of your hair for sure. And he says, I bet he would have cut it off with a saber. And then Dithard says, I wouldn't let him. You've always been like that. I'm glad he died. So Bougainvillea, it seems like they're a very well-to-do family, and they both, especially Dithard, kind of harbors resentment towards their father, which is interesting. But I like that the image of Violet we get, she like curls her toes like when she hears Gilbert. So it's like almost like a love at first sight thing, or love at first sound. But she looks like ratty, like she's just been picked up, and he said he found her. So I'm curious to know how this all went down. But so Gilbert, it's been established, has been promoted, and I brought you something nice today to celebrate your promotion, which is creepy. It's very, very creepy that Dithard says, I brought you something, like viewing Violet, and that seems to be the trend, is that a lot of these guys, especially those in the upper class or military, view Violet not as a person, but as just a weapon. Because he says the line, got it, you only use it as a weapon. Like, she has no humanity to her. He says, don't get attached. Too bad! Guess who's catching feels in this? But it's Gilbert. And I just noticed that Gilbert has a scar on one side of his face, and Violet has a scar on the other side of her face. Show, you're going to make me cry, aren't you? You are, aren't you? But yeah, Gilbert, like, he just has such his expressions are so emotional. And Dithard says that he's depressed, but I'm like, no, I think he's just, you're in the middle of a war. Of course you would be if you're a major general. He says, open it. And I love that the composition, the symbolism, there's Dithard on one side of the doorway with his legs crossed, and then there's Gilbert on the other, like he's crossing over. Like, it's just like crossing over into this other world. And then him like pulling back the thing and he says, "Hey, get up." And she looks thin, like you can see her sternum and everything, like she's thin. And then she just sees his scar. "I found her in the northeastern war zone." Huh. And that twinkling, ah! It's love, damn it. It's love, damn it. Why is he dead? Nope. So I find this all interesting, this whole idea of the auto memory dolls and of Hodgin's business. So the idea is just these people coming in and they want these people to write letters for them. And these letters, basically, it's if you try to write like a love letter back or write a letter to someone or settling businesses, like the one guy's trying to write a letter to settle a debt, and it's just trying to find flowery ways to write to others when you yourself aren't able to. So that's kind of the business. And the whole Cattleya being so scantily clad, she gets house calls. So it's very weird. It's kind of like, it's not perverse, it's not sexual necessarily, but there is something kind of weird about her getting personal house calls to go write letters. That part with her taking the typewriter with her, that part's kind of weird. That part's like, is there other stuff along with it? That's weird. But I like that Iris, I like that we have these flower names like Violet and Iris. And I wonder, is Cattleya a flower as well? And then, of course, Erica. And Iris is relatively new, and Erica and Cattleya have been there a while. And it's funny because Erica's been there a while, but she has a lot of, self-doubts in herself of her being a letter writer, which is interesting because she's been there so long. But yeah, Violet's whole personality and taking things so literally, it's like she's not fully made for that position because it's not something you can be literal with. You have to be subjective and kind of bend the truth and say things in a nice way to people that maybe are not truthful. And Violet doesn't seem to know that. She's just very objective and by the book. But yeah, you can tell though that the women here instantly feel like a sympathy for her because it looks like her arms are like cut from here down, is all mechanical, and Violet just acts like it's no big thing. And they're all kind of like, oh, well, she's clearly been through some stuff. So there's a couple scenes in here that were a little bit odd, and I wanted to go back to, okay, so the women at the reception desk, Nerine and Lillian, poor Benedict in this. Like, you can't help but feel bad for him. Like, him coming in all sweaty with lunch, like, trying to be all, like, impressing the ladies, like, man, look how hard I've worked. And they're like, oh, you stink. And, like, just won't end up having lunch with him. And there's some guy at the back, so there is a guy working there, but him trying to impress the reception girls just doesn't work. His pants are ridiculous, by the way, with those crisscrossed open, like, crisscrosses in the front. What are those? What even is that? When you see a man who's been toiling away, can you at least say thanks for your hard work? It's like, and I like that this old man sitting here, who's another deliverer, is like, oh, son, you don't even know. And their perfume stinks. They're just trying to snag rich guys at the reception. Yeah. And they're like, you're not a rich guy yet. You're just a delivery boy. But then he's like, hey, you guys. And then, of course, he says the wrong thing. That Iris is like, call us by our actual names. He's like, it's like, poor Benedict. He's trying. Now, so there's part of this that was interesting. And that is what happens with Cattleya later. So they ask how Violet is doing, or Hodgins asks how Violet is doing. And we have Iris tell Erica that she's just been writing war letters to those who are missing or left behind. And it's like that, it's kind of grim and grisly because Iris is like, I'm sitting here writing letters to these families of these war victims, and I just want to write a letter to a famous actress. So it's kind of like, there's a little bit of selfishness there, but it's also like how you frame the situation. Like, the war has been going on so long in this area that it's completely reconceptualized their idea of normalcy. Like, she's like, oh, I've just been writing letters to war victims. Can I do something fun? And it's like, under normal circumstances, it's pretty disturbing, but it's become the normal thing for her. So she's kind of just like become desensitized to it. And it's just become part of daily life, which is pretty grim. But I wanted to talk about the conversation with Cattleya and Hodgins, because that went by so fast that I was like, ugh. So Cattleya is clearly the requested one. She's the one that's best at her job, and you wonder if that has something to do with the way that she presents herself. I really like Cattleya. She has a really, how understanding she was and patient she was to Violet was really nice, because at first Iris and Erica both wanted to like shun Violet and turn her away, and Cattleya was instantly like, no, it's fine, let's just work through it. Like, she's a very patient woman, and she's very, very good at her job, so I like her character already. But Hodgin's asking about her, and the way that Violet uses certain terminology, like I need to recharge and practice all the time. And so, sorry for all the trouble. So I don't know if Cattleya was trying to cover for Hodgins when Benedict came out. Like, she didn't want Benedict to know that they were talking about Violet, maybe. And Claudia. So Hodgins' first name is Claudia. Is interesting. And oh, Benedict's like, I want to see what's happening. And he's like, don't call me by my first name. Just because he wanted a girl. Calling out a girl's name in bed. That was terrible. Oh. So him and her have clearly hooked up. I'm not getting paid this month. So that set up a lot of things. So old Hodgins and Cattleya are clearly a thing, or have something on the side at least. But him saying I'm not getting paid this month, that's what leads Benedict later on to tell Violet that he's worried about the company, that they're not making any money. But what you find out is that the reason he's not getting paid this month is he used all of his money to get the brooch back for Violet. And there's so many red flags in that conversation that we'll get to it, but there's so many red flags that it's like, if Violet was understanding and processing things like a normal person would, she would have instantly picked up on the red flags. But because she doesn't, she doesn't realize what he's saying. And I love this. I love the scene with Cattleya and Violet right after that, where she's like, oh, you're getting really good, Violet. And Violet's like, yes, this weapon is efficient, calling the typewriter a weapon. And it's great, because normally, like, I could picture Iris or Erica being freaked out by that. Like, why'd you phrase it that way? But Cattleya doesn't let on that at all. She goes, a weapon, you're right. She's like, it's a weapon for working girls like us to go out into society and fight. And it's like, And then she's like, I'll have you job shadow a real doll tomorrow. So I love Cattleya. She's like, I didn't know how to feel about her at first, but she's so kind and accepting and patient. And it's the concept of her going to people's houses and type is ridiculous to me. I'm like, oh, but maybe the people can't travel because of like a physical disability. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Maybe that's the whole reason why. So that's maybe why she travels. I feel so bad for Violet, because we have the scene where she writes the letter for the woman that doesn't really like the man, and it goes horribly wrong. But she's sitting at her typewriter looking out at the ocean by candlelight, like typing, like in a very romantic setting. But you can only imagine that what she's typing is very literal, and just like, hello, Gilbert, here's what's happening. And she's like, I wanted to tell him about my job and everything. So I'm thinking Hodgins isn't going to mail the letters, is he? He's just going to put them like in his desk or something. And I'm like, is she going to find him later and question him, be like, why'd you hide the letters? Like, I don't know. The idea of keeping, I don't know why. Well, I do know why he's keeping it a secret, because that's the only reason she's there still, training and trying to do well for Gilbert's sake. But I'm like, dude, it's a shame that she can't tell him, that he can't tell her that he's dead, because she'd probably freak out in her own way. And she's also been shown to have the capability to cause a lot of damage. So he's trying to keep everything in check. But it's so hard. And then we have all the scenes of her and the letter writers, and it clearly not being suitable. So we had this woman come in who was really condescending at first. And I'm so curious about her, because she comes in and she has like all this fancy clothes and stuff on, and like all the jewelry and everything. And her legs are positioned the same way that Erica's are, which makes me wonder because this woman's like clearly putting on airs, like she's not as wealthy or as to-do as she pretends to be. And I like that pose of her being her feet being in the same position as Erica's, to kind of show that they're actually on equal footing, even though she's pretending to be a posh person. Where's Cattleya? Baudelaire. It's like, uh-huh. And so you can never go wrong with her. Interesting. So she sits down. There are little details I was trying to pick up on there. She's like, someone asked me out. Man who started an automobile company. And so like her legs, her knees being raw, and her fingertips having blisters and being raw too. So I'm like, is she a prostitute? Or is she like someone that... it's over my head. I'm like, is she either a prostitute or reading it that way, or is she someone that's literally like a working person that's just pretending to be a well-to-do person and trying to impress this guy owning the automobile company? That part I wasn't quite sure of. But the whole point here is that Erica is doubting her ability to be an auto memory doll, and then Violet's like, I can do it. I'll write you a love letter. And Erica's like, no, that's a bad idea, because she overheard everything that the woman said. And yeah, just not good. And it's funny because, again, this woman says, I loved him, and Violet looks at her, and Violet's like, I just want to know what the phrase I love you means. And I'm sure this is confusing for Violet because she didn't get any answers from this woman. The woman said he loves her, but that doesn't answer Violet's question. So, and I love Cattleya having that conversation with her. And then we see the Major. The expressions on these characters' faces are gorgeous. Like the sincere looks that Cattleya and Benedict give Violet. Like they both seem to empathize with her and sympathize with her to a degree. But poor Violet. She like just wants to connect with her Major. And it's like, that's just not happening. And so I like that Erica stands up for her in the end. And it seems like Erica wants to become an auto memory doll too, because she wants to have the same, she wants to pay it forward and do the same for others as was done to her when she read the novels of the blind woman that the man created the typewriter for. And she takes her glasses on and off, and I wonder if like her eyesight's really going quickly, if maybe that's something that's happening. And because obviously you won't be able to type if you can't see in front of you, or you won't be able to type as well. So and I like that Erica's like, I'm the one who's not suited to be a memory doll. And we have to have a puddle with a ripple in it because it's KyoAni, and they're like, oh, by the way, we can animate water. Like, I feel like every episode is going to have rain or some form of water in it so that they can just show off to us, like flexing, like, here we go, look what we can do. Dr. Orland, the authority on the printing press. His wife Molly was a novelist who went blind and couldn't write anymore. And so he created the typewriter for her. And he called it the auto memory doll. And so Erica now wants to write too and express those same feelings, and she has his book too. I love that. I like Erica's character a lot. I actually like all these characters. They're all unique and connected to Violet in their own ways, but they also have their own agendas going on too, which is really nice. And then, of course, we have him getting her the brooch. And she has the outfit on, the outfit that I've seen like at all the thumbnails, her outfit, which is so interesting. It's like so billowy and Victorian, and I love it. And it's like all the sleeves and stuff hide her arms and everything, and her hair's done up, and then she gets the brooch that is like his eyes. And she gets emotional. Like, this is the only time she really ever gets emotional, is when she sees the brooch or anything that has to do with the Major. Like, she's so cold and emotionless 90% of the time, and then anytime anything with Gilbert's brought up, she's like, it's the Major. It's like, and here's like the red flags. Like, everybody in there is listening to Hodgins. It's like, you could put two and two together if you just, he says it was found on the black market. Well, someone must have stolen it from your belongings. Like, and just like, why wouldn't he have gotten it back? And she just doesn't put two and two together. She's like, I've got my brooch and I'm happy. Yeah, and of course, I love that Hodgin's just looking at her. Like the sincere looks again. And this last scene in the bar, oh my gosh. The final scene in the bar, I had to use it as the thumbnail because the way they animated the whiskey glass. Mwah, mwah. It was that in the brooch. Like, I had to. Thank you for the drink. And she's like, what? I like that she looks at him like, what are you doing? Like he's from somewhere else. And then her asking, the lighting of this bar scene is gorgeous. And it's so beautiful. I absolutely love it. Gilbert. He's a friend from my military academy days. From the Bougainvillea family. And so that Margrave, I don't know what a Margrave is. I feel like I need to look that up. No, even though he's from a rich family, he was a man with spirit. And then I'm sorry, him like his like face and everything getting all like choked up, and then it cuts to her looking at the brooch. And she's so like entranced by it and then falls asleep with it. Yeah, no. And she just has it with her and kisses it. No! He's not coming back. It's gonna be really sad if he actually is dead and Violet has to figure all this out and like come to terms with what love is and then find out that he's dead. Like, that's gonna be tragic. Why would you tell a story like that? Why would you do that? Why would you have this girl who is like a robot learn to love and learn what love means and then have her find out that he died? That's the worst love story ever. Oh my gosh. But I really like all of these characters. There's not a character in here that I really dislike so far. They're all, it's like free. Everyone's different and unique. And KyoAni, why are you doing this? It's so good. It's so good. But yeah, I don't know. I like this show so far. I feel like my reactions aren't very expressive because I'm just so sucked in during the whole episode that I'm like, what is this? So I hope you enjoyed this reaction. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers. But yeah, I'm really excited to see. They talked about a training course that she would do next episode. I want more backstory. The beginning and ending of this episode has me so hooked because I want to see more with Gilbert and Violet. I want to see more of their past and their relationship with one another. And I feel like this whole series is going to slowly reveal it to us. It's going to be like opening the present, but not in a creepy misogynist way, like Diet Hard says it. So, yeah. Yep. But in any case, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please let me know what you guys thought of the reaction of the episode. But yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and next week we'll hopefully get more with Gilbert and Violet and see what happens with next week's episode of Violet Evergarden. Have a great week, guys. Take care and stay safe, and I'll talk to y'all again real soon. Bye.